Thanks for tuning in to Talking Point on BloombergQuint. I'm your host, Niraj Shah. The auto numbers for the month of November are now well and truly digested. The festive season has turned out to be rather good for almost all participants. The question is, how are companies feeling about the numbers gone by? How are they feeling about the last month of this fateful year of 2020? And can 2021 be materially 2020? Well, let's put all of those questions to Mr. Shashank Srivastava. He needs an introduction. He joins us right now to talk about, well, Maruti, yes, of course, but the industry at large too. Mr. Srivastava, good having you. Hope all is safe.
Thank you very much for having me on the show.
The pleasure is ours. Now, when I look at the analysis that almost everybody's done, and when I look at the numbers ourselves and the stories that we put out on BloombergQuint, it does seem that the festive sales for two-wheelers were maybe slightly lower than what the street was working with. And for four-wheelers, maybe due to production issues or otherwise, there were a few hiccups that certain companies face. How do you characterize the month of November for the four-wheeler industry?
So for the four-wheeler industry, as you know, October was one of the strongest months ever, both in terms of wholesale as well as retail. And part of the November was in the festive season. In fact, the Diwali period, the Diwali festival, which is a 5-day period which auto industry normally tracks, starting with the Dhanteras from the 12th till the 16th of November. So that was one of the better months, better Diwali sales across, in fact, the last 10 years. So I think the industry was a little apprehensive going forward, seeing whether post-Diwali the demand will hold or not. But the initial booking figures and the inquiry levels post-Diwali also suggests a strong demand. And that has resulted in November retails in the industry to be about 333 or 334,000, which is also, I think, one of the strongest Novembers which we have seen ever. So, and you are very right when you mention about the wholesale numbers were a little less, about 288,000 in the industry. That's because the number of working days in most of the plants across the country in the industry have been a little lower because of the festivals. So I think the inventory levels are pretty low in the network, and that's a good sign coming into December, because I think there would be a lot of a push in the pipeline for replenishing the stocks.
Okay, so let's dissect this. You are suggesting that even though the wholesales were flat, I mean, I think for the industry maybe the estimates are about 8-9%, but for you the wholesales were flat.
9. For the industry it was 9% up, and for us it was a little down. I think 1.8-2%.
But you are saying that you are not bothered because you are not looking at wholesales, but you're looking at the retail numbers.
Yeah, so one of the real good tests for actual market condition is retails. It's because the wholesale actually indicate how much you push to the dealers, and what dealers sell to the customer is retail. So that number is pretty strong. In fact, in the industry, the estimates are November grew about 52%. And for Maruti Suzuki, retail estimates are that we have grown almost 69%. So I think that's a pretty strong retail growth that we have seen, not only in Maruti Suzuki, but across the industry.
So, Mr. Srivastava, a hypothesis that if indeed the retail sales continue to remain strong, and I think a Jeffries note suggested that the last week of November, registrations were up about 11%. So let's assume for a moment that if retail sales remain strong, and with inventory levels being so low, there is a possibility that come December or January, your wholesale numbers might actually look better than the retail numbers. And if the retail numbers are strong, your wholesale numbers might actually look very, very strong.
Yeah, possible. That's a very real possibility. So if, as you know, if the stock levels are lower, retail sometimes does get affected. And if production remains strong, then we can see a strong wholesale. I just mentioned there would be a lot of replenishment of stocks to be done at the dealerships.
Yeah, and lower non-working days, right? Because we'll hardly have any holidays now, December or January per se, compared to October and November.
Yes, that's true. November, particularly, we had a large number of holidays. So yes, so November in terms of production was a constraint.
Okay, just one last question on this thing on the working. are any, I mean, we've not heard of any micro lockdowns per se in India compared to maybe rest of the world. But is the rising COVID situation hurting work or production in any fashion whatsoever?
No, I don't think so, because as far as our daily production capacity is concerned, even in November we were operating at peak capacities. So it's not about COVID, because I think now the government is not going in for a lockdown in the industry. So even though we have seen in some of the places like Ahmedabad, where you have a weekend lockdown, so that does affect retail sales on those couple of days. But I haven't seen industrial activity being hampered by the recent lockdowns. So I think the government has not implemented those lockdowns for industrial activity in most of the places.
Okay. Mr. Srivastava, how happy are you with the mix that is being sold out at Maruti? Because I think even in Q2, while the numbers, the volume growth was really impressive for you as a company, I'm presuming you would be happy with it. But the realizations on an aggregate came off a bit. Is this a function of the product mix? Will it continue to remain this way? Will it change? Can you throw some light?
Yeah, so obviously post-COVID, what we have observed is there seems to be a telescoping of demand downwards. So it doesn't mean that segments in different segments this demand has disappeared, but surely it has moved a little downward, as you rightly pointed out. There are some segments like the SUV segment which have shown good strength apart from the hatches. And yes, so you would probably see a reversal of that going forward once the COVID effect goes away. But the COVID effect probably, when it will go away, is the question mark. And on the bit about realization, of course, it depends on many things, not just the price of the vehicle. It depends on the market conditions, the type of sales promotion levels that are there in the market, the competitive scenario in each segment. So I think what you finally get in terms of profitability could be different, and it is not always a function of the vehicle price.
Do you fear the temporary disruptions, Mr. Srivastava? I mean, in terms of pricing from competitors in different segments. Like today, I was looking up the launch by Nissan of the Magnite, and that's a pretty disruptive price that they're given for the compact SUV. Could that have a bearing on the functioning of all other companies as well? Because an odd company here in some vehicle, another company in some other vehicle are launching these fairly disruptive pricing vehicles.
Yeah, so obviously any disruptive pricing can have market impact, absolutely no doubt about that. But remember, automobile purchase is not like a commodity purchase. We believe consumer is looking for value over a lifetime of the product, which is pretty large. So it's not just about the acquisition cost, but also the cost of running. It is also about cost of maintenance. It is about the consumer satisfaction. It is about the various other aspects of car buying, which probably influence the car buying process. So I think it won't be just the disruptive price alone. But you are right, disruptive prices obviously have to be taken note of, and industry will have to take actions accordingly in the market.
No, what I was actually trying to understand, because all through the last many years, that we've seen Maruti, right? You guys used to be the dominant force at being able to launch a vehicle at a great price and still maintain margins, right? Because of the market share, because of all the base, etc., that you have and all. Is that in any fashion? Are you worried about that at all? That it getting disrupted in the short term? I mean, I think even for the month of November, if I look at it, Hyundai plus Kia have done reasonably well in the segments that have traditionally been your dominant segments.
So I'm not so sure which data you are referring to, but if you're looking at market share data, if you see the last 17, 18 years, Maruti Suzuki has market share 50% plus in 3 years. In 3 years only out of those 17 years, and those 3 years have been the last 3 years. So it actually, our market share has been growing. If you look at market share 2010 onwards, it's been growing. So I am not so sure but if you are saying that we are very conscious about market share, of course we are. In fact, one of the reasons why Maruti Suzuki is successful, we are paranoid about what can happen in the market, and we are always on what we can say high alert, always. So I think that high alertness has been there all these years, and we will continue to be on the same path. We are very conscious and we are very sensitive to our market share. Absolutely no doubt about that.
So in fact, I'm echoing that point, Mr. Srivastava, that you've been market leaders, you've managed to hold on to that, and that used to be your forte, that you used to be able to launch the cars at the most competitive pricing now and still maintain margins. What I'm trying to drive home the point is that maybe there are companies who are now launching vehicles which might impact their margins, and they are okay with that. Could that have a bearing on your strong points? Is the question.
So yes, I was saying that disruptive pricing, if that's what you are referring to. Obviously, we have to take a look at the pricing strategy followed by competitor. Absolutely, there is no doubt about that. But I must also tell you that as the economy has grown, consumers have actually moved from low cost of acquisition to value. So as long as your product and your brand offers that value to the consumer, it is not that low cost, which is important. It is what value you get, even if it is at a higher price. And I think that it varies from segment to segment. And obviously, we keep a very close track of each segment. And in fact, if you look at market shares in segments like hatches or even MPVs or vans, our market shares have grown substantially. It's the SUV segment which is an issue at the moment. And I think that's where we are focusing on with some of our new products which we have launched, including the new Brezza 1.5 liter and the new S-Cross 1.5 liter. And it's not just the product; it's also about services. For example, we are offering subscription services now to consumers. It's a new way of using cars, buying cars, possessing cars. So I think those are the other things which are also important. Or, for example, our work on digital platform. These are also things which are as important for the consumer buying experience as it is the product or the price itself.
Sure. Actually, I'll come to that subscribe piece in a bit as well. I would want to know a little bit more about it. But I heard you mention here in the interview, Mr. Srivastava, that you believe that SUVs could make a bit of a comeback, although it was difficult to time. Now, is it a factor of that you are making these new launches in the SUV or the refurbished names in the SUV segment? And do you expect that SUVs could make a big comeback for you or for the industry come Jan, Feb, March? I think the industry has done reasonably okay on the SUV front.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you look at, this is a trend which has been going on for the first few years now. And it's not just in India, it's there if you look at figures of China or Latin America or US or Europe. The segment of SUV has been growing. And in India, it's actually grown tremendously to just about, I think, 7-8% in 2010-11 to almost 36% today. And going forward, our projections are that it will probably be 44-45% in another few years' time. So that segment has been growing, and it's not just about SUV, but the design preferences of consumers. The high ground clearance, for example, the more sturdiness which the SUVs offer. So yes, that's a segment which we are very closely looking at. And of course, that was one of the reasons that in 2016 we introduced the new Vitara Brezza in the sub 4 meter segment. And today it's the market leader by far. So we believe that the mid SUV segment, where we are lagging behind in terms of market share, is also something which we need to look at very closely. How to leverage our existing product, which is S-Cross, to get a higher market share there. Absolutely no doubt that SUV's trend has been there in the last 10 years. Actually, the percentage of this segment in the overall sales in the industry has been.
Okay. Couple of green shoots, or not green shoots really, but good points that have worked, and I would love you to dwell on that one. Ciaz, I think, showed some major uptick in sales. Was there a particular reason why that happened, you reckon? And also, please finish that point, please.
Yeah, so Ciaz, yes, it's been, but actually the numbers have roughly been similar in the last few months. So I think it's more of a base effect which you see in the current month.
Okay, fair call. And And the small CV segment, it was one of my colleagues who told me this. I was not aware of you guys, kind of slowly making those inroads, even though the base is small. Can you talk a bit about that?
Yeah, so we wanted to keep it quiet, but since you have mentioned it, yes, we have obviously been working there, and we have a super carry. As you know, our parent company Suzuki is very famous for these smaller commercial vehicles across the world. And in India, somehow we had not flourished in this segment, but we have slowly built up our market share in that segment. In fact, we are competing quite strongly in that smaller SUV, in the smaller CV segment. So our market share actually this year has gone up. It's past 20% now. So that's a good beginning for us. But then we are not resting. We want to do more, and definitely we'll try to gain more in this segment.
You reckon it could be a big growth driver, Mr. Srivastava, or it's a too small a base to really call it that?
Yeah, so pretty much at this moment, it's a small portion of our sales. So we do roughly 3,000, 2,500, 3,000 range of cars. So in a portfolio where our average sales in a normal year is like 125, 140,000 range. So it looks small, but then it's slowly building up. And going forward, I think we will continue to strengthen in this segment as well.
Okay, last couple of questions, Mr. Srivastava.
Yes,
Firstly,
yes.
New launches. A lot of people are waiting with bated breath for new launches, and of course, refurbishments, which you spoke about a bit on that.
Yeah. So of course, I'll not be able to give you forward guidance on the product plan which we have, but I'd like to say one thing about the product launches going forward, which is that our view about the Indian economy and the Indian industry, auto industry, is pretty bullish. We do reckon that the Indian economy will continue to grow. Forget these small blips which we see once in a while, and as well as the auto industry will continue to grow. And we have announced always that our product plan will be aggressive and we'll keep introducing new products. If you recall last year when the market was down almost 20% on wholesale, about 15%, 10-11% on retail, even then we had introduced two absolutely new products, which was the Espresso in the small car category and the XL6 in the MPV category. So we did not hold back based on market conditions, and I think going forward our attitude remains the same. We'll be very aggressive in introducing new products in the market.
Okay, no names needed, but any timelines? Would it happen before the end of the year?
No, every year we have we have been introducing new products, and we continue to maintain that strong product plan.
Okay, last question, and that is on the leasing business. Can you talk a bit about that?
Yeah, so the subscription business is what I was referring to. So it's something which is I think gaining quite a prominence ever since it was introduced in the industry. A few years back, actually, only it has been introduced in the more developed countries. In India, it's come very recently. So what we have found is there is a trend, especially in some buyers, of having asset-light usage of cars. Asset-light means that they don't want to possess the car in their names, but they just want to use it. And leasing, therefore, is a very good option. And currently, leasing is a very small portion of the overall industry. But even now for individual, and it is largely related to corporates in our country, but now even the individual buyers, they are looking for vehicles under subscription, which is basically leasing with a shorter time frame, rather than financing a car or giving cash upfront for the car. So it's a different way of purchasing car. The importance of the subscription is that you don't have to go through the hassle of insurance or finance or resale. You just have to make a monthly payment and you are good to use the car. And it's especially useful for people with a shorter time frame in mind. For example, if you are transferred to a new city, you will go back to your hometown or to the or some other city. Or for example, as I just mentioned, that people want a asset-light purchase. They don't want to commit to a large payment in finance, which is usually for 4 or 5 years, or they don't have enough cash to buy it on cash. So for those people, it's a rising trend of getting vehicles on subscription, and we have offered that services in a few cities as a pilot, and we are quickly going ahead and trying to expand it across the country. The initial response has been pretty good.
Okay, all the best for that. In the next interaction, we'll probably talk a bit more about it. But thanks so much for talking to us, Mr. Srivastava. All the best.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Pleasure is ours.
Thank you.
And viewers, thanks for tuning in to this edition of The Talking Point.